Broken place today. Look at that smile on Jaylon's face.
Wagwan
Everyone, I need
Generals.
everyone to look at that smile on Jaylon's face. Look at that straight face on Perry.
Wagwan Generals.
Perry,
Wagwan.
I'm gonna go with you first because we know Jaylon's happy. I ain't even gonna ask him how he is. Perry, how are you today?
I'm blessed. I'm actually I'm a happy camper.
It doesn't matter how he is. We the champs, baby. Yeah. Yeah.
Yo, Jaylon coming with
Yeah.
that energy today.
He was
About to
talking
be a
all
good
that
one.
shit. Dallas in 7, Dallas in 6. They're the best two players on the court. And what did that get you? Nothing. Yeah.
Yo,
Oh
Perry's
yeah,
all
it's all
frozen.
smoke today. It's all
Yo,
smoke today.
Yo, Perry, you got a rebuttal, bruh?
Bro,
You were frozen there for a bit.
I want to let you all know
So was
something.
Kyrie.
Boston Celtics, NBA champions. 18 championship in franchise history, the most winningest franchise in NBA history. To start off the show today, we're each going to take about a minute just to reflect on the championship, say what we need to say before we dive into our topic. So I'm going to start. Shout out to Boston. I think Brad Stevens needs a lot of love. What he did in bringing Drew Holiday down, I think Drew Holiday was a big X factor. Without Drew Holiday, none of this happens. Like, he was playing offense, defense, he was showing up, he was distributing, he was leading, and he was the guy who has won a championship. So I think that was a huge get. Championship experience is really needed these days. And I think Drew Holiday brought that, and he helped get them over the hump. So shout out to Drew Holiday. Brad Stevens made it happen, re-signing Al Horford, putting that team together, getting Kristaps, all of that. So shout out to Brad Stevens, like, moving from coach to executive, having to deal with the Ime Udoka stuff, and then putting in Joe Mazzulla, and people were like, I don't know if Joe Mazzulla is that guy. Joe Mazzulla has a championship, one of the youngest to win a championship. So shout out to Joe Mazzulla, and then shout out to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown for finally getting done. There's been so many conversations about these two. Can they coexist? I have questioned, can they coexist? I can't talk shit no more. I can't say nothing. They can coexist. They brought a championship home. We'll dive into the championship and how they got there, because a lot of people have some things to say about how it's the worst finals ever. We'll talk about that a bit later, but for now, that's my piece. That's what I have to say. Jaylon, we'll turn it over to you. Take your minute. What do you want to say? Yo, Jaylon, you're on mute, brother. I know you're excited, but you're on mute.
My apologies. I want to say shout out to Brad Stevens for doing what he did 3 years ago. I think the move from coach to president of basketball operations was the right move for him. Every year he improved the Celtics through the front office, through what he was able to do, and now he's reaping the rewards of that. You know, taking the risk of hiring a 35-year-old coach, 34-year-old coach at the time in Joe Mazzulla, but then trusting Joe Mazzulla and trusting the project that he had. It was very easy to move on from Joe Mazzulla last year, and he didn't. He trusted what Joe Mazzulla was doing, and he gave Joe Mazzulla the right pieces in order to become successful. But also shout out to Brad Stevens. He got Drew Holiday from Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, and a first-round pick via the Warriors, which is protected, and a 29 unprotected first-round pick that the Celtics have that they ended up giving up. So they really didn't give up much. Lob Williams, obviously, I was sad to see him go. And then for the Kristaps trade, you gave up Marcus Smart, who I believe needed to go anyways. And then you got a first-round pick back from Washington, which is huge because that's going to be a very important pick. It's probably going to be a high pick, and then you got a top 4 protected pick. That belongs to the Warriors. All that to say, actually deserves a lot of credit. Joe Mazzulla deserves a lot of credit because it's very hard with a lot of pieces to have them come together and mesh so well, and as well as they did. He seems to have gotten them motivated super well and kept them with their eye on the prize super well. And finally, I would like to say, Jason Tatum didn't take the bait, as I mentioned before. A lot of people were like, oh, you're not shooting the ball enough. It was very easy for him to come out and just keep chucking up shots, but he made the right play consistently throughout this playoff run. Even though he wasn't shooting the basketball well, he did everything else that you need from a superstar, and he's a world fucking champion now.
Yo, Perry, the floor is yours.
So for this one, I have to take off the bonnet. And now what I have to explain is this. So as my team was losing, obviously I had to come to terms with it when 3-0 hit. I had to sit down and reflect. And I reflected on why I started this entire podcast with you fellas. I reflected on why I enjoy the game of basketball, but I also reflected on my life as a human being. I want to say that Firstly, I don't want to take away from anything the Boston Celtics did. I think it's beautiful. They made it to the finals, played against the Warriors. They lost that series, came back with a vengeance, and took care of business. Their team was the best team in basketball. I think it showed us that team basketball does win. But now I want to segue in honor of Men's Mental Health Month. I want to say Kyrie showed us something. I want to say Kyrie's career has showed us something. I received a message from a friend and they spoke of, or they asked me about my thoughts, and now I want to give them. News headline showed Kyrie should retire. What was Kyrie thinking leaving LeBron James? Kyrie to the Celtics didn't work out. Nets implosion, Kyrie's fault. COVID was the only shot Kyrie wouldn't take. And
That's
the
crazy. That's so
NBA,
crazy.
the NBA top 75, like, to me is a joke, but Kyrie was left off it. The reason why I'm naming all of these things is that we should always view failure as a lesson. Kyrie showed us that it is bigger than basketball. I didn't believe in moral victories before, but I believe in them now. I'm wearing a black do-rag to signify the death of the negative Kyrie narratives. Now that we all understand why the do-rag is black, I want to say that basketball is a metaphor for life. And I have to thank everything Kyrie Irving has done in terms of showing us what happens when you do the work, showing us what happens when you ignore the perceptions that others have of us, but also showing us that it's okay to be human. It's okay to lose. It's okay to make mistakes. It's all about how you come back from these. To see a fifth seed make it to the finals, beautiful, admirable. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics, but shout out to Kyrie Irving. Everything that I've seen this playoff run reminds me of why you're my favorite basketball player to ever touch a basketball. With the exception of obviously like the people I know personally.
Bet. So, Boston, NBA champions.
Yes, sir.
What are our thoughts on how Boston got to this point, how Boston played? We'll talk about their path and how people don't think this was the greatest playoffs ever. People think that it was some of the worst. We'll talk about that later, so keep that for later. But for now, like, just on Boston, we can talk about the Mavs. What are our thoughts on Boston winning? Perry, I'll go with you so that Jaylon can rebuttal.
I think the Boston Celtics were like a more complete team. I think obviously like the expectations that were set at the beginning of the season were to win a championship. Every team like to a certain extent has that, but we have to be realistic. When I look at how the Celtics went about the season, I think what they did was similar to the Knicks in terms of instilling championship habits, playing the right way, making sure that everybody could have a big game, all movement. Look at how Jason Tatum, like, look at his attitude in the sense of like, I don't care if I win Finals MVP, like I just want to win. Those aren't thoughts that you see from a poorly coached team. That's a very disciplined team. It's a deep team, and each one of the players understand their roles and performed it to perfection. Joe Mazzulla, shout out to him. I think he did very well. I think his interviews were hilarious, insightful, and this series was beautiful. It shows you that there's this championship was a very important championship because it showed us that there's no way to microwave success. Like you can't microwave success. Like in the league, you have to figure out how it's going to get done. You have to build it over time. And I heard a saying, and it was, "Grandma starts her cooking for Sunday dinner on the Friday because good things take time." And that's kind of what the Celtics are to me. It's good things take time. And that's those are my thoughts. Like it was a very well won championship. Like any questions that we have about their path to the chip, I think would raise the argument like which conference is better, right? Like if you think any team could have beat the Celtics, then what do we have to say about the Western Conference? I think it was this was beautiful. Like this is what the playoffs are about. This is why I fell in love with the game of basketball.
Yo, Jaylon, we'll go with you, and then you know what? I do want to get into that conversation about people talking about the playoffs before we talk about some other stuff, just because it fits in with Boston winning the championship. So, Jaylon, answer the question. What are your thoughts on how Boston won this championship without
Oh,
mentioning their path just yet?
I think Perry Khan hit the nail on the head in terms of um, everybody sort of understood their role. So, Joe, it started from the top down. Brad Stevens understood that he had to improve upon last season. So he had to improve on Marcus Smart. So he had to upgrade that position, and he had to improve on Malcolm Brogdon. And I think adding a little bit of depth and going out and getting a stretch five in Kristaps Porzingis. And keep in mind, I was very, very critical of that move to begin with. But it worked out. It worked out flawlessly. Allowed them to play, fluent 5-out basketball. Then it started with Joe Mazzulla understanding how to keep them focused and keep their eye on the prize, not to let the outside noise kind of dictate how they play and stuff like that. Understanding there's going to be ups and downs, trials and tribulations, hurdles they're going to have to overcome. And then, like Perry said, it trickled down to Drew Holiday, taking a lesser role, scoring Al Horford, understanding that he can't start. They can't have 6 starters, moving himself to the bench. Oh, sorry, offering to move himself to the bench. Um, with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, understanding that they don't need to average 30 a game each. They don't need to shoot 30 shots a game. They got to get Kristaps. They got to get D. White. They got to get Drew. They got to get them some shots as well. And then the players like Peyton Pritchard. I think Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser did a phenomenal job throughout the entire playoffs, understanding that their minutes are limited. So their shots are going to be limited, but more importantly, on the defensive end, digging in on the defensive end, Sam Hauser was somebody who was hunted a lot, kind of like he reminds me of the way they hunt Duncan Robinson, with the exception that Sam Hauser actually fights on the defensive end. No disrespect to Duncan Robinson, but Sam Hauser is he showed on multiple occasions when he was switched on to Luka, when he was switched on to Kyrie. That he's capable of moving his feet and actually making them make tough shots. Uh, so this playoff run by Boston, I think, was one of the better playoff runs we've had in a while. It was dominant. It left zero room for doubt. And yeah, number 18's there, baby.
People are talking about how this year's playoffs were one of the worst of all time, right? Just because of like all the blowouts we've seen. Some of the parody was tailored towards blowouts. And Boston still won, but there are questions about how Boston won, or if XYZ happened, would have Boston have won? So I want to know, do you guys agree with this sentiment? If so, where does this championship fall short? But if you don't agree, why do you think that this was a good finals and this was a good playoffs? Jalen, take it away, brother.
So, my apologies. Joel Embiid, I'm going to quote him exactly. He said, the injuries playing a role in allowing Boston to dominate in the regular season and playoffs. Embiid brought up ailments that plagued several Eastern Conference teams this season, including his own, a meniscus injury that derailed his year. He said, and I quote, "You also got to understand the whole East was kind of hurt this year, myself included." I'm very confused because didn't the Sixers lose to the Knicks?
Yep.
And Joel Embiid played every game, so I'm confused on how that has any effect on Boston. Like, I'm extremely confused on what that has to do with Boston. Now, I will not sit here and act like Jimmy Butler not playing the Miami series wasn't uh, a plus for Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows that Miami's been the Achilles heel of the Boston Celtics for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we were going to beat Cleveland with or without Donovan Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to beat Indiana with or without Tyrese. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
Tyrese played the first 2 games, and what was the series when he played? 2-0 Boston. And then we got to the finals and played a fully healthy Dallas Mavericks team who were cooking at the time and completely dominated them. But I want to bring it back to the year prior when Boston lost in Game 7 to Miami in the conference finals. And 26 seconds in, Jason Tatum rolls his ankle and to me completely changes the landscape of Game 7. And I've had time to reflect. I was able to um, sort of sit down and watch the post game interviews of the finals last night. So Jason Tatum came on, the players, the coaches, so on and so forth. And uh, the unanimous sort of comment that they made was that last year taught them a lot. Jason Tatum, more specifically, he said that it taught him he needs to be tougher. His body needs to be more durable. Jaylen Brown, it taught him that he's got to be tougher. Al Horford alluded to the fact that it taught them they got to be more mentally tough. And I don't think that there was any scenario in which the Boston Celtics want to win the championship this year, based on what I heard um, in those post-game interviews. It just seemed that this year they clicked, they got the right pieces. Everybody, more importantly, was on the same page in terms of the goal. Last year, it sort of felt with Marcus Smart, and years prior, it felt with Marcus Smart that he had an identity crisis on who he really is. And we saw in the Philadelphia series he was taking last-second shots when the ball should either be in Jason Tatum's hands or Jaylen Brown's hands. This year, we had none of that. We had to the point where when Dallas went on that big-ass run in Game 3 and brought the game close, Jason Tatum at that time was struggling. Jaylen Brown was flourishing. Jason Tatum gave the ball up to Jaylen Brown the last 3 possessions of that game, and Jaylen Brown got 3 straight buckets. So, what people saying that this is the chalk this season up, it's been the worst playoff run. You notice how they didn't say that when Golden State won the championship 2 years ago against Boston. They didn't say that last year when Denver won the championship against Miami. They only say it when it's Boston that wins, when it's a team that is unanimously despised league wide by the fans. This is a very deserved championship. They did everything they had to do, and like we said, your best ability is availability. If players are unavailable, that's nothing to do with Boston.
Perry.
Well put, Jalen. Can you repeat the question, Bino?
Yeah, I got you, brother. So people are talking about this year's NBA playoffs, and they're like, this is one of the worst playoffs of all time, just because of the blowouts that we had in many of the series. You heard Jalen right there read out quote for quote what Joel Embiid said. I want to know, do you agree that this was the worst playoff of all time? If you do, where did it fall short? But if you don't agree, why was this playoff run fine? Why was Boston like a deserving champion, with everyone saying that like the finals sucked?
Sorry, Perry. Before you go, I just wanna put in one last point. Perry said this earlier. We just had a 5th seed go to the NBA Finals. How is that a bad playoffs? Sorry, go ahead, Perry.
A fifth seed. I'll go further. A 5th seed that was pretty much counted out every series that they played in.
They were underdog in every single series.
Exactly. Against the Clippers, no one thought they would win, myself included. Against OKC, I was like, they ain't beating OKC. OKC too dominant. They beat OKC. In the conference finals, with the way Minnesota took down Denver, I didn't think they would beat Minnesota. They took Minnesota down. The parity of that conference really showed that it was a good playoff. Not one of the best ever. That I'll say that, but we can't go and say that it's the worst or discredit Boston for winning. And Perry, I'm just gonna segue into this because I know this is one of your points. And this is a direct quote from Perry. Perry says, when we talk about this, we have to. It literally brings up the conversation of which conference is better. So Perry, take it away. Sorry, Perry, that was just something that stuck with me before when you were talking.
100%. I appreciate that too. It means you're listening for once.
Hey.
I have to say, as for Philly, so I can't really answer this question without answering it all. So what is it that? Can you ask me what Usher said, Jalen or Bina, whoever is first?
What did Usher say?
If I'm gonna tell it, then I'm gonna tell it all. And I think that's what it's time for. So, permission to speak candidly? Permission granted. Perfect. Thanks, guys. Joel Embiid has been injured since his rookie year. He was injured at the draft. He sat out his first year. He was injured every postseason. Like, do you remember a postseason where he was completely healthy?
No.
So when we speak of injury, I've and I remember I had this conversation with, I believe it was Jalen and Haydom, where Anthony Davis was getting injured. And the question was, maybe he needs a different approach to his off-season regimen. Like, I'm not going to be the one to tell an NBA player how to train, but do you remember us having that conversation, Jalen?
Yes.
And what is
Yes.
it that your grandma says? Once is, go ahead, hit me with the quote.
Once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, three times is a pattern.
So how am I gonna be like? How am I gonna use a pattern as an excuse?
Hmm.
No, I'm
Hmm.
asking. It's not rhetorical.
No,
You can't.
yeah,
Tom,
facts.
Tom Thibodeau, his teams usually get run down and injured by this time, right? Like
Hmm.
historically,
Hmm.
and it's not just
Hmm.
like this isn't his first or second time that this happened. Jalen, quote please.
Once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, three times is a pattern.
So now, obviously, like Indiana's Indiana. Like I never really saw them beating the Celtics, and Miami. Like I think they're in the midst of figuring it out, but Miami's the only team to me that can really speak of Celtics not like getting past them. Joel Embiid's been injured every year in the playoffs. A lot of people criticize his conditioning, and we saw that like I guess this year, right? Like you're not built
Hmm.
to play as many games as you're playing if you get injured at the
Hmm.
same time every year. It's like Christmas. Um, so
It's like Christmas.
like it is like, and it's no disrespect to Joel Embiid, like we all have like whatever, not all of us, like I don't think I'd be able to do 35 games at 20 minutes a game in the NBA level. So like I don't want it to be sound like I'm hating on him, but we have to just call a spade a spade. Like he's always injured. Like most of these teams, like it's consistent that they're injured by like their coaching profiles or by their player profiles. What I would have to say is like, would it be different if everybody were healthy? Sure, but like we can say that for every stage of the playoffs. Everybody's injured to a certain capacity. Um, I think if you're to use that as an excuse, personally, I think Joel Embiid believes possibly that like the better conference is the Eastern Conference. But if you're going to use that as an excuse, then anybody who used that as an excuse but also argued that the Western Conference was stronger, uh, those two statements aren't like they don't really make sense to me, right? Like if you're saying that like the Celtics would have lost to whichever other team, like it didn't happen. Like that's how we have to just chalk it down to. It didn't happen. There are a lot of ifs that could have affected the Dallas Mavericks in making it to the
Hmm.
finals, and I never brought that up,
Hmm.
right? Like I never brought that up because it served my team. How am I going to bring it up when it goes against my team? Like
Hmm.
it's just it's
Hmm.
not like this finals and this playoff series was not like the Raptors run where the Golden State Warriors team was injured and there was a big asterisk on it. This one was more you
Hmm.
beat a lot of tough teams. Like, yeah, the Celtics path there wasn't as fun to watch. I'll give that to people. Yeah, there were a lot of stars that were injured. I'll give that statement, but I think it's just not fair to hear from a competitor who had the opportunity to change those variables.
But sorry, Perry. Like, you make a great point, and like I don't get. So people are saying you just said people are saying that the Celtics' path to the finals wasn't as fun and it wasn't as intriguing to watch. But what did you expect? And I just want to give you a couple stats. So the Celtics were first in offensive rating, third in defensive rating, the number one seed by 9 games, 16-3 in the playoffs, 122.2 points per 100 possessions, which led the league by far, an 80-21 overall record, a 10.7 point differential in the regular season and playoffs, and they're the fourth team in 28 years to be top three offense and defense. What did you expect?
Um, I get what you're.
Boston was the best team all season. Like you put out the numbers, and the number that I was gonna say is that they finished the season 80-20. 80 fucking wins and 20 losses.
So like, I'm confused on what people kind of expect, like why they're surprised. Like they ran through the league during the regular season. They showed in on both sides of the basketball that they are the elite of the elite, and it wasn't close. Like it was by a large margin.
Can I
And
respond to
then
this?
they run through the East again.
Can I respond to
Go
this?
ahead. Yeah. So
That's
yeah.
not my problem. Like that's not an issue I have because like
No.
we're
I
always
know.
gonna
I
hate on
know.
the
I'm
way
just saying
winners
for
win.
the
You know what I'm
masses.
saying? But let's go with the Masters.
Hmm.
Mm,
Um, I just want us to be consistent. Jalen, you know how much I love consistency.
Hmm.
Bina, you know how much I love
Hmm.
consistency. Am I lying? Is that not what I've always argued with Hatham? He who shall not be named
Yes.
Hatham every week.
He's a Voldemort.
Um,
Yeah.
I just want us to be consistent. At the beginning of the playoffs, we said, when do we lose patience with superstars?
Hmm.
Every year we watch the playoffs, we watch the Celtics come up short, with the exception of this year. And the question is, like, the question we had was, with all this heartbreak and everything, like, you'd think that they'd be able to make the jump. Is that
Hmm.
just me?
No.
So how are you then going to criticize the quality of the jump?
Regardless of the quality, they made the
Like,
jump.
am I tripping?
No, and I believe we said at the beginning of the year that
We have to look at this team
we were
differently if they
talking
don't
about.
win.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So I just don't get it. Like, Jalen, if I ask you, hey, can you pick me up a Calypso from the like from the store, and you pick me up a Calypso from the store, and I'm like, but it wasn't expensive enough. I feel like you'd look at me like I have a third head. You know what I'm saying? You'd be like, bro, what are you talking about?
It was
Like
in the right store you
you
got it
you
from.
asked me to get a Calypso, and I got you a Calypso. You know, so
Yep.
Yeah,
when I look at the
yeah,
Celtics, like, I asked them for a championship. I wanted to see a championship. Everybody wanted to see them win a championship. Like, that was what the majority of the trash talking was. Correct me if I'm wrong.
hmm,
So how are we going to criticize the
yeah,
championship that we asked them to get? You know, this is giving a
yeah.
lot like my Haitian mom. Like, that's what it's sounding like. You know, like, I feel like my Haitian mom would be able to, like, break this down to me and explain to me, like, the logic, because I'm not getting it. I'm really not getting it. Shout out
So
to my mom. Love you
when
lots.
we talk
Your
about
favorite son.
what when we talk about the NBA playoffs and we talked about the Boston Celtics, there's a huge debate going on about who's the best player. We saw Jaylen Brown won the Eastern Conference MVP and the Finals MVP.
Hmm.
So I want to talk about who is the best player on the Boston Celtics roster. And Brown won both MVPs. Do you agree with that? Not taking anything away from Brown because he did play exceptional. I'll start this one and say that Jason Tatum is the best player on the Boston Celtics team. I think in every aspect, he is the best player. He's the leader. Jalen alluded to this and has been alluding to this, and it's something that, as I kept watching the playoffs and watching more and more Boston Celtics games, you can just tell that he's efficient when the ball is in his hands. I told Jalen this for the past 3 weeks. I'm so impressed with Tatum's ability to drive and kick. That
Hmm.
driving kick this man is doing draws the defense inside. They clog up the middle, kicks it out to a guy like Hal Orford. Bang, bang, bang. You know, his numbers have just been exceptional, so I do think he's the best player. With that being said, I think when Jason Tatum was coming into the league, we knew Jason Tatum was going to be good. He was touted to be the next face of the league, right? I think Jaylen Brown is exceeding what people thought he would do. And that's why there is this conversation. But I don't think that Brown is better than Tatum. I just think that Brown has exceeded his expectations because we knew Tatum was going to be good. You know what I mean? So that's my view there. Eastern Conference MVP, I'm okay with Jaylen Brown. Finals MVP, I do think, like, I'm okay with Brown winning. Don't get me wrong. But I do think it should have been Jason Tatum. Just everything that he did and the things that didn't show up on the stat sheet, I believe that Jason Tatum played his like out of his mind. And Jalen alluded to this before too. Jalen, I'm stealing another one of your points. Didn't always have to score to impact the fucking game. And Jalen, you said it. You said this guy could have been selfish and got his, but that wouldn't have helped the team win. He actually went the other route and he helped his team win. With the way he played, his team is now a champion. And yes, and a finals MVP would have been nice. But look at him in this picture. He has the championship. That's what he was gunning for. He wasn't gunning for the MVP. Boston can get there again, and then then Jason Tatum probably get his. But I do not think Jaylen Brown is better than Jason Tatum at all. Jalen, you're the floor is yours.
For the Eastern Conference Final MVP, I don't really care about it. Like it's a what, a 4 or 5 year old award, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure it has that much prestige, if that makes sense. Like, I don't. Like at the end of the day, like I said, I don't really care about it. So Jalen Brown winning it, I think it was deserved. I think he was the best player in terms of. I think he's the reason. Obviously, especially that game two performance, his performance in game one. They're the reason they were able to get past the Indiana Pacers so comfortably. But again, being kind of stole all my points. Jason Tatum has been the best player for the Celtics the entire playoffs. He's done every single thing you needed him to do. The only thing he hasn't done is shot the ball well. And, really at the end of the day, if that's the only thing against you, you're facilitating, you lead your team in points per game, assists per game, rebounds per game. Like, I'm not sure what else you can do. The reason I think Jalen Brown won Finals MVP is because of his defense. Jason Tatum wasn't guarding Luka and wasn't guarding Kyrie, so I think the impact that Jalen Brown had on the defensive end as well as on the offensive end is what kind of tipped it over the edge for the voters of the Finals MVP. Because at the end of the day, he gave Luka a torrid time. Luka likes to play bully ball and was unable to bully Jalen Brown. He didn't bite on any pump fakes. He, kept Luka in front of him. He made it, a hard time for him to bring the ball up and really get comfortable. Every chance Luka got to have Jalen Brown switch off him, Luka took that and jumped at that opportunity. But what I will say is that I think Jason Tatum was the best player in this series. I don't think it was close. I think the most valuable thing that Jason Tatum provided in this series were two things. The second most important thing was his ability to switch and guard, but the most important thing was his rebounding. And I think because Boston won the rebounding battle every single game that they won in this series, I think that put them over the edge. I think that I think that Jason Tatum, kind of dominated the glass. It helped Boston set the tempo and play at Boston's tempo. The one game that they didn't dominate the glass and he wasn't, doing a good job on the rebounding basketball, Dallas were able to up the tempo, run, play at their pace, and get up and down the floor with those alley oops and stuff like that. But I think that whenever Jason Tatum was active on the defensive glass and getting downhill, facilitating, he was able to get paint touches. Joe Mazzulla talked a lot about paint touches and kicking out, and I think that's what allowed the Boston Celtics to be successful, especially against the Dallas Mavericks. And I think Jason Tatum's at the heart of it. His facilitation, he had timely buckets, especially in Game 3. He dominated the entire first half when Jalen Brown was struggling, and then when Jalen Brown got it going, he was able to coexist, scoring the basketball. But I'll finish on this. Jalen Brown, I think, deserves this kind of vindication for all the slack that I personally gave him last year for being unable to dribble with his left hand. He showed up this year and hooped in the finals, but dominated both sides of the basketball. So I won't say that he didn't deserve his finals MVP. I would have gone with Jason Tatum, but I understand why people went with Jalen Brown, and it makes sense to me.
What about you, Bree?
The saddest thing of all of this is that I slightly agree with Jalen. So I think that's the saddest part of my day today. Jalen, your happiness is spreading sadness, and I'm supposed to be the happy one. So, get ready and get sad.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Don't let this happen again, fam.
My fault. I won't.
But now I feel like there's a difference between the MVP and the best player on your team. I think.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So when the Golden State Celtics finals happened, I remember Jalen and I believe Haydom had a conversation, and I said I feel that Jalen Brown is like the Draymond Green of the Celtics. Do you remember that conversation, Jalen?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I said I think it's like there's like a level of like competitiveness that Jalen Brown brings to every basketball game that I don't feel Jason Tatum brings to every basketball game. But there's a level of skill that Jalen Brown needs to reach to be as effective as Jason Tatum. And I think Jalen Brown reached that, but Jason Tatum is just like, he's going to be the best player on most teams. But he's not going to be the MVP on most teams, if that makes sense. I think for him to have won the MVP this year, there's a step to his game there's a leap to his game that I feel he hasn't yet taken. And that's the ability to, I guess that's shooting at a higher percentage in the playoffs. That's scoring at a more consistent basis, knowing that teams are going to double, triple, quadruple team you and scheme against you. things of that sort. So I think he did what he was supposed to do. However, it's kind of like the Golden State Warriors when Iguodala won. Before I complete the sentence. However, the discrepancy in terms of their value isn't as great. Am I making sense?
No,
No,
you're
that
making a
makes
lot of
perfect
sense.
sense.
So,
And
like
the
Iguodala was the MVP of that series, regardless of what anybody wants to say. Like it's a fact, he is the MVP. But he was the MVP of that series because he was able to provide something um, that was directly correlated to winning more than Curry was. But Curry was also a player that was triple teamed and game planned against. So the step Curry needed to take was being able to perform despite that. And I think that's what we're looking, or that's what I think the next step for Jason Tatum is being able to
Hmm.
perform at the point in which he does during the season in the playoffs, but even better um, in the playoffs, knowing that teams are game planning against him. I think Jalen Brown
Hmm.
accomplished that for the entire playoff run. I think for the entire playoffs, like Jalen Brown was the MVP of the playoffs.
So, Perry, just because I know you saw me starting to laugh when you mentioned Andre Iguodala, every time I hear his name, I think of the Max Kellerman thing when he's like, "Yo,
Iguodala.
The fate of the
yo,
universe.
yeah, fate, the fate of the universe. Who do you want shooting the three? I'm taking Andre Iguodala."
He's like, I'm taking
So yeah, that's why I was
Iguodala.
laughing. But no,
No,
your point.
I love I loved what he did. I think another point I wanted to bring for Jalen Brown is like all the big moments of the Celtics,
Hmm.
like the clutch moments, they
For
were
him.
him. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, Jason Tatum is a player that gave us the opportunity for the game to be clutch,
Yeah.
but the kill shots were from Jalen Brown. Like every time a team
Mhm.
Correct.
like died, he killed them. Like he's the one who took the kill shot.
Correct.
I have to
So
give it to the killer.
so quickly here, Eva, producer, thank you for all your work. Can you put up the picture of the two losers? And I don't mean that with disrespect. I mean they lost in the finals. They are the losers, the runner-ups. Luca and Kyrie. What can be done to get Dallas back there? I just wanted to like say one little thing. I think Boston can get back there easier than Dallas can. I think not even necessarily that the Eastern Conference is easier. It's just that Boston's built to do this, to go on a run where they win multiple. I think like with Drew Holiday healthy, and leading that team along with Derek White, who is playing out of his mind and has been playing out of his mind, I think Boston has a better chance of getting back there than the Mavs. And
Hmm.
I do think that there's some teams in the West who are going to bounce back. I think OKC is going to come back bigger, better, and stronger with the experience that they got. That's a hurdle that Dallas is going to have to face. I think Denver's going to figure it out. It all depends. It all hinges on Jamal Murray actually being healthy. So I think that there's that in that conference too. And I know this means like I'm breaking down conference to conference. And I just think that there's other teams that could make a run. And then we have some free agents that we got to see, like, where's Paul George going to go, right? We have different things that can happen to see how things will play out next season. But I think, like, Dallas needs to get more pieces to help Kyrie and Luca do well. They have a lot of good role players, but maybe an elite shooter could help. Maybe like a Klay Thompson, where like when Luca and Kyrie are driving to the basket and they're getting clogged up. And can't do a floater or can't get to the rim, they can kick it out like Jason Tatum does to Al Horford and know that their mandem is going to knock down the shot, right? So I think stuff like that could help Dallas get there, but I think Dallas's road to get back to the finals is going to be harder than the Boston Celtics. Perry, what do you think?
Um, I agree and disagree.
That's your team.
100%. Well, no. Um, I want to make a I want to clear something up before anything. I have no loyalties to any teams, and that's not to say that I wasn't cheering for Dallas, because I want people to know that I was cheering for Dallas and my heart is broken. But I'm a Kyrie Irving fan.
I love it.
If Kyrie Irving gets traded to Zimbabwe, guess who's buying a Zimbabwe jersey? Anywhere Kyrie's playing, like I'm cheering for him. He's my favorite basketball player of all time, which is why I was cheering for Dallas. So, from my assessment of Dallas, like watching their team, I think they need another They need an elite shooter, like you said. I think Klay Thompson goes on 29 out of the 30 teams and starts, and for some reason it's just Golden State. I think for Dallas, they're like two pieces away from being a team that can expect to make the finals. I think obviously like Luka needed this heartbreak. Um, Kyrie needed this as well. That's how leadership is born and bred. The most important part about this series for Dallas, I find, is what do we do when Kyrie and Luka aren't going? And I think that was a question that like was consistent throughout the entirety of Dallas. But last year, when they didn't make it to the finals, we couldn't necessarily blame Luka and Kyrie because they lacked the necessary pieces. Remember? But now this year, we saw what happened when Luka and Kyrie don't get going. And that's that they need another playmaker. I would trade for like a Klay Thompson or a Paul George.
So, Jalen, um, you praised the Celtics, and I know you don't actually hate the Dallas Mavericks. What can Dallas do to like get back there? What would you add? What would you change, or do you think that it's done?
Um, Let me start off like this. I think in the finals, the game plan against Kyrie was executed to perfection. As you know, Bina, Andrew asked me if I still feel that Kyrie Irving is the most skilled basketball player to ever, you know, play basketball, based on this series. And I'm not going to be anecdotal and forget the rest of his career and put all my stock into this series to make my decision. I still think he's the most skilled basketball player to ever play the game.
Thank you.
I don't think it's close either. I know
Thank
he
you.
has Stephanie high on his list, but if we're watching basketball with our eyes and not our asshole like he does, then it's clearly Kyrie Irving. With that being said, Kyrie Irving played like poo in this final series. He was poo. Now, I don't, I can't see, I can't, I wouldn't have been able to predict that he would play as bad as he did, but I also can't predict that he will play this bad again. So if I am the Dallas Mavericks, to me, going out and getting another superstar like a Paul George doesn't make sense to me for the simple fact that now it takes shots away from Kyrie Irving, it takes shots away from Luka Doncic. And those two have gotten you this far. They just fell short to a better team who played better. We can all agree, right? So,
Yeah.
in my opinion, they need kind of like a sixth man, sort of somebody to man the bench and somebody who can come off the bench and just be a flamethrower, but also be in your closing lineup who can knock down shots. And for me, I'm not sure what the player is. Maybe a prototype like a Malik Monk or a Jordan Clarkson, somebody like that. I think really transcends the Mavericks bench. I think you got to move on from Tim Hardaway. He doesn't make enough shots. Like he made his first shot since May 18th on Friday.
Is that a
That's damn near a
stat or is
month
that
of not
just
making it.
is that a stat or are you making that up?
No, it's a fact. On God, it's a fact. On God, it's a fact.
You know, low key, it's kind of hard to perform at that level consistently. So
And and I get it, but I'm just saying, like, if you want to be back in the same situation, you want to get over that hump, you got to upgrade those pieces. Tim Hardaway, you got to move him. Him and his contract, kind of, there's not a lot of value there.
mhm.
I think you got to move on from Maxi Kleber as well. You can't have somebody who's afraid to shoot. And every time Kyrie or Luke gave him the ball, it's like he shot away from the moment and wanted to give it back to them. It's like, shoot the fucking ball, man.
Can I ask a question?
I think you also, yeah,
My fault. I'm sorry for interrupting you. So the reason why I said like a Paul George or a Clay is that it provides what I think is the equivalent of a Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis type thing, where if those players take like a step back or whatever the case is, a Paul George would give you another playmaker outside of Kyrie and Luka. So if Kyrie and Luka don't have it going, you still have a connector for your team.
hmm
Now, when you looked at Dallas, I felt like the biggest issue is number one, like I don't think Kyrie performed to the level I think he can perform to, but I think there are hurdles every player needs to overcome, and I think like this is what you know what I'm saying. Like this is a part of the process. But what it exposes is that like and maybe I didn't articulate it like on my first go around because obviously like I'm flooded with emotion. But Kyrie and Luca, when they didn't have it going, what was the direction of the Mavs offense? And that's a question that I had watching, right? Because when Luca wasn't playing well and Kyrie wasn't playing well, it seemed like the solution was to shoot themselves out of that situation.
Hmm.
Is that just me? Did you see the
So
same thing?
no, so I understand what you're saying. I just don't think Paul George is the solution because I do agree. It seems that when they got into holes, their thought process was to shoot their way out of it. And in that position, you kind of gotta get to a set that you trust and get to an offense that you know you can run no matter what. Um, the reason I like a Jordan Clarkson and like kind of like a stretch four, I'm not sure who that stretch four would be, but the reason I kind of like a Jordan Clarkson would be that he can take a lesser role, he can man that bench unit, and you upgrade on Tim Hardaway, who like is physically incapable of making shots. Now, maybe you can chalk it up to having a bad playoff run or whatever the case may be. I just think that the contract for value doesn't make sense. The way I see it, and I think the biggest problem with Dallas Mavericks was that um, they had Luca wasn't guarding. Luca was an absolute pylon, and this was throughout the playoffs. So for me, I don't want to change the formula too much in terms of the roster makeup. I just think you got to upgrade two positions in terms of your first bench scorer and your second, bench, the second player coming off the bench, which is like Maxi Kleber, Josh Green, whatever the case may be. Then I think Luka's got to come back in way better shape. Kyrie's going to come back a lot better, and I think they can then run through the West again with more firepower. So off the top of the dome, I think Jordan Clarkson is somebody that you have to look at. I think that DeMar DeRozan is another person that you have to look at, although he doesn't shoot the three well.
Mm-hmm.
I think he would definitely be another player who can not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily shoot the same amount of shots, but somebody who can still get to his own shot when these two are struggling. Now you can put the ball in somebody else's hands who can play make.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't require the same amount of shots as this stage in his career, but somebody who's trusted he can get to his own shot, and it's a makeable shot for him, if that makes sense. Because you're running it with Jalen Hardy, like you know what I mean. Like you significantly upgrade that position there, and maybe another person's what's the white boy on Atlanta, Boyan Bogdanovich.
Bogdanovich.
Bogdan Bogdanovich is another one I think that replaces Kleba or Tim Hardaway, if not both. Again, somebody who's a flamethrower, somebody who can shoot the basketball, who's a willing shooter, not scared of the moment, can knock down shots and still create his own shot. So I think those are two players that I would definitely look at. More so DeMar DeRozan than Bogdanovich. But if you can't get DeMar DeRozan, then I think Bogdanovich is a nice backup option. Him or Jordan Clarkson.
So now that the NBA playoffs are done, we're going to be talking a lot of offseason. We're going to be talking about what teams should do, where we think players should go. We're going to be diving into some of the contracts that might come out. Yo, your boy Jason Tatum eligible for 315 over 5
Pay that,
years.
brother. Pay that,
Oh,
brother.
he's gonna get the max. Like there's no doubt about it. Luca's probably gonna get a over $300 mil contract. We're gonna be talking about all of it. And on the next episode, we're gonna be talking about the best small forwards in the league right now. Thank you for tuning in to Broken Plays.